My name is Key Williams. I'm a junior at Harvard College and an undergraduate researcher under Dr. Shen and Shen Labs, working to spread the awareness of neuroscience in the expanding neuroscience career fields. I'm joined here today with Dr. Soylu, who is an associate professor of educational psychology and neuroscience at the University of Alabama. He commands a lab focusing on the mathematical and embodied cognition and how the structure and function of the brain correlates to learning and cognition within the brain involving education. Dr. Soylu, it is an honor to interview you here today, and if I missed any pertinent information, please feel free to let me know. Okay, to begin, let's start with how you found yourself within your current occupation and your journey of how you got there.
Yeah, well, that's a long story. As an undergraduate student, I wasn't actually interested in being in academia. I was a Linux systems administrator for a few years as an undergraduate student. And then I developed interest in cognitive science towards the end of my undergraduate studies and started following a master's degree in cognitive science in Turkey. I'm originally from Ankara, Turkey. And then I applied for PhD programs in the United States. And I completed my PhD in cognitive science and instructional system technology at Indiana University, Bloomington. And during my studies at IU, I took some neuroscience courses. I was in the cognitive science program. However, I realized that neuroscience is the new frontiers for psychological sciences in general. And we are talking about early 2000s. I decided to develop some expertise in neuroimaging. So I started working in the cognitive neuroimaging lab at Indiana University under Dr. Charlene Newman, and did my dissertation there on embodiment of mathematical cognition. So I conducted fMRI experiments for my dissertation. But I was doing a dual PhD in cognitive science and instructional system technology, which was in the School of Education. So I had interdisciplinary interests, both in education and neuroscience. But educational neuroscience was an emerging field back then. There were only, I think, one or two programs. There was one at Harvard, and then I think the one at Columbia at the time. So it wasn't a super popular subfield yet. So I wanted to get a job in that, but I did a postdoc at Northwestern University for 3 years in the Connected Learning and Computational-Based Modeling Center, CCL, at Northwestern in the Learning Sciences program. So that further developed my interdisciplinary interests in education, learning design, and neuroscience. And then they decided to start an educational neuroscience initiative at the University of Alabama, which was perfect for me because they were looking for someone who can start a PhD concentration in educational neuroscience. This was back in 2014. So I came here and started a PhD concentration in educational neuroscience. So we developed courses in educational neuroscience for the first time at UA. And then, I worked on that for a few years. And then we came up with the idea of developing an undergraduate program in educational neuroscience as a continuum of the PhD program. And the idea there was, PhD students graduate and they tend to become researchers or faculty, and they don't get to do maybe as much in the field. So we wanted to develop people who would be practicing more, or people who would follow different career trajectories, but people who have a foot in education and neuroscience. So with that motivation, we developed that program. But yeah, so that's the overall trajectory that I've taken so far.
Okay, that is very inspiring for both me and those watching. And how would you say that the day-to-day life of an educational neuroscience professor and researcher looks like?
Yeah, so part of my job is, of course, to direct the educational neuroscience program here. I meet with students, adjust the courses, and develop new courses with faculty. So that's one aspect of it. And then I have the research side, of course. So I do both EEG and MRI, structural and functional MRI research. So I work with my students and with my colleagues, collaborators, collecting data, analyzing data, writing grants, that sort of typical thing. I think one good thing about my position is the teaching aspect of it and program development aspect of it parallels my research. So I teach courses. So I teach two courses every year, and one of them is a computational methods course, which is also related to my research, computational methods in cognitive neuroscience, and then the other one is electrophysiology. In addition to that, I taught many different courses in educational neuroscience, but in every course that I teach, I actually learn a lot of new things. So teaching is a kind of a good opportunity to learn things that you haven't had the chance to learn. So I developed courses in areas that I don't feel maybe fully comfortable with, just so that I had the opportunity to do more in-depth reading. And with the computational methods course, I had to learn a lot of new things in signal processing. So I think all of these activities, teaching, research, service, when they all come together and they're intertwined, I think that works best for faculty or scholars in general.
Yeah, that's that's very inspiring. And for students and others watching this, what advice would you give them about pursuing a career in educational neuroscience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So educational neuroscience being an interdisciplinary field, I think it helps to have many different experiences, both as a researcher and an educator. I had different learning design experiences. So starting from, and this is of course a simple thing, but I actually realized that I rely on these experiences a lot. I used to tutor math for high school students when I was in college. And so those were my first teaching experiences. And after that, I worked as a TA, and then I had the chance to work with high schools and teachers and students during my postdoc in Chicago. And all of these practical experiences really help you develop a theoretical perspective and also come up with experimental study ideas. So educational neuroscience being in a interdisciplinary field, I think it's important. So of course, the neuroscience aspect of it is quite dominant, right? You develop your expertise in research methods, you collect data, analyze data, and design experiments. But on top of that, you need to have practical experience as an educator. And I think that's a really crucial thing, because otherwise you are a cognitive neuroscientist. You are not an education neuroscientist. Part of the job of being an education neuroscientist is to be able to know the concerns in education, practical concerns, current concerns in education, being able to communicate with teachers, administrators, and being able to do studies at schools, which is a total different thing than doing studies in the lab, in the controlled environment. It's super chaotic at schools, and you rely on social skills, convincing people to do studies, sharing your ideas. So I think for anyone who wants to do education neuroscience research, who wants to be an educational neuroscientist, I would recommend visiting schools, do volunteer work, teach workshops to teachers. Of course, on top of that, you have to develop your skills as a cognitive neuroscientist. Things like being able to code, understand signal processing methods used in the fields, both in electrophysiology and neuroimaging. Read lots of literature, also do historical studies. So don't kind of confound yourself with just the current research, because a lot of the ideas that are dominant now have historical roots. Talk to philosophers, people who are doing more theoretical studies. And just generally, I guess, interdisciplinary engagement, I think is very valuable.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your insightful words. And finally, to wrap up our interview, referring to the publication that your lab made about the neuronal differences between bilingual and monolingual children, what would you say was the most surprising find from specifically that study?
So that study, so I worked with my student, Mona Anchan, which is actually a graduate of Harvard from the Mind Brain Education program. So she's still working on her PhD now. So the motivation for that actually came from my experience as a bilingual person. I realized that when I go to the market, so I buy stuff in bulk, and then you have those numbers that you have to report. And I like kind of memorizing them and then going to the cashier and just telling the cashier instead of writing it on the package. But I think of numbers in Turkish because I grew up in Turkey and my initial educational experiences were all in Turkish. And I still think of numbers in Turkish, which is quite unique because in all other domains of cognition, I'm comfortable thinking in English. But numbers, I still have to translate. So I delved into that research, and I found some findings saying that the first years of school experience pretty much